Refuse collection and disposal costs. Would someone like to move that we conduct a localised trial into more efficient collection of refuse during the 2014? Tim Scandrett, seconded David East. Is there any discussion on that? Pauline?
I just ask a question about it. Does that actually mean looking at reducing the service, or what does it actually mean?
Well, this came up as a result of a submission from one of the submitters, who identified that in 10 years, the cost of collecting our refuse had gone from 4% of our budget to 10% of our budget. Now, that is a significant increase of the allocation of our rates income to this operation, a requirement. It's part of our core business, but in terms of the percentage of our budget being allocated to it, it's gone from 4% to 10% in rough terms. Now, that is a significant increase, and so the recommendation that I'm making to Council is that we actually, because one of the recommendations that staff put to us before the annual planning process was to reduce the pickup of one of the bins. I can't remember the green bins, right? So to reduce the weekly to fortnightly, and at that stage we weren't keen to go down that track without some knowledge of the impact that would have, and also what benefits would actually accrue. Because sometimes you can say, well, that will reduce the cost by, half, but actually it may not, because there may be contractual arrangements, there may be all sorts of other things. And we thought that it would, well, I personally thought that it would be a better idea as a result of the submission that came in that said, have a good look at this, let's look at let's drill into all of the, what's behind such a massive increase in the proportion of rates. And it may be that, in a post-earthquake environment, there was a lot more rubbish that was being collected, and it wasn't as efficient in terms of the return that we were getting on, recycling and things like that. There might be a whole lot of reasons behind it. But let's see if we can invite a community to be part of a localised trial to see if we can get the optimum solution for the city. And I think that that's a much better way of, rather than just simply saying, let's cut the amount of the service and save money, let's work with a local community that is willing to work with the council to see what the most efficient collection of refuse would be that would actually have a financial impact on the city as a whole in terms of its budget, but would also produce a better result. So that's the reason for a localised trial into more efficient collection.
Well, that's great, but I wonder if we should be actually calling for a full report on the whole of refuse collection in the first place, to sort of try and identify where those costs are. Are they in the red bin or the yellow bin or the green bin for a start? And I'm all for localising, especially green waste. I mean, I think we could look at community gardens and neighbourhood recycling for green stuff. But I'm just wondering if this is, we need a report before we move into a localised trial.
I think that's sensible. So if Councillor Scandrett and East were acceptable, we will. It is recommended that Council ask for request a full report on. A full report on the costs of, on the most efficient way of the most efficient and effective delivery of refuse collection services.
I think
and as part of that, authorise the conducting of a localised trial.
I think we also need data on the historical collection, you know.
No, but it may have changed. I mean, if we request a full report on the most efficient, effective delivery of refuse collection services, as part of that we'll be looking back, but also looking forward. So,
okay, as long as we do that.
Yeah.
Because we do need the breakdown between those bins, which the costs and the... I mean, you might have some people that only put their green bin out once a month. Other people put them out,
yeah,
or even once every 2 months, or, you know, where's the cost?
Yeah.
So long as we do, that's, I'm happy.
Yep. So I think that's a very useful addition if Councillors Scandrett and East are fine with that. All right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And the last one is headed the Stadium Trust, but it isn't actually about the Stadium Trust. It's actually about the stadium. So if we could take that word trust off there. And would someone like to move this? Phil Clearwater, seconder Glenn Livingston. And Yanni, would you like to?
The concern I have about this motion is that actually there's no action, and I think given that a large number of the submitters talked about the need to do something differently around the spending on the central city projects, I'm just really unclear what this is actually doing. So I think there needs to be a second part to this amendment or recommendation that actually sets out what the process is for us to be making these decisions and considering the community feedback. So is that something, given what you've said around the July 31st and the public process we will go through, that we could amend this to note that as part of the council's consideration of its financial strategy, we will be going through a public consultative procedure over the prioritisation of spending on anchor projects and central city projects?
I'd rather not do it that way, but...
Because it's like, I mean, I'm just really mindful that this is 2 years in a row that people have made
I know what you're saying,
around
but
where we're spending money.
I know what you're saying,
Yep.
but we've entered into an agreement with central government around some of these issues, and I would rather... the reason I wanted this included was to be in a position publicly to note and reflect on the fact that we received significant community feedback on the stadium rebuild and central city issues. It is really to put it clearly on our agenda that is the feedback that we had from our community. So, and that is to feed into the work that we're doing in terms of our financial strategy and the long-term plan. So I don't mind adding in a phrase to say that this needs to be reflected in our consideration of our financial strategy, so that we're looking at what we have to do for ourselves as a city going forward, but not to step over the line into something where we have an agreement, because if you have an agreement with somebody, you either honour it or renegotiate it or breach it. But I'm not in a position to do either of those two alternatives. And at the moment, we're obliged to honour that contract. So I would rather that, and I did want it on our agenda so that we were very clear that the community had fed back to us the priority is here, not the stadium rebuild. And there are central city issues that seem to have taken priority, and we want you to think out into our communities. That's the feedback we had on our annual plan. So we're going to obviously have to feed that back into the next step, but I don't want to take the next step yet, and I can't.
The question then becomes is when do we take the next step? And given that we've had requests...
I'm going to set all this out on the 31st of July.
Right. So, okay, so that could easily be reflected in there.
to say that it will note significant community feedback on the
Can I draw
stadium.
attention to the 3-year plan? Because I think we're starting to get into the realms of changing the 3-year plan.
Yep.
And the 3-year plan does say that the council acknowledges that it has signed a binding agreement on funding the rebuild with the government, and this has been committed to and cannot be changed unless agreed by both parties.
Yeah.
So
But this is the opportunity for us, I would have thought, based on public submissions, when we ask people, how should we be spending our money, to say, well, actually, we agree that things like the stadium should be a lower priority, and we would push it out. And so the indicative timeframes in the cost share have been unilaterally changed repeatedly. So the Metro Sports Facility, for example, timeframe's been changed.
Yanni, the point is that that statement that was just read out is in our 3-year plan. So we have a binding agreement with central government. Can you read it out again, Peter?
So it's page 50 of volume 1. The council acknowledges that it has signed a binding agreement on funding the rebuild with the government, and this has been committed to and cannot be changed, bracket, unless agreed by both parties, end bracket.
So we've had significant community feedback on the stadium rebuild, and I do think that the public discussion at the moment around the children's playground, for example, indicates that the public don't have a very clear understanding of the nature of the decision making. So I think that noting significant community feedback on the stadium rebuild and central city issues to help inform our consideration of the long-term plan or our financial strategy. I'd actually prefer to think of it as part of our financial strategy planning. I think it's a good thing. Yeah, Paul.
Actually, the statement you've got up there actually opens up two conversations. One on the conversation on the proposed stadium, and a conversation on the current temporary stadium. So I think it's a good note.
So, Phil.
I think it highlights the fact that people are concerned about the stadium. We've got a lot of submissions about that. We're very conscious of the position of our current temporary stadium and how that is all part of our city too. And clearly, though, the whole issue does need to be addressed.
So just that temporary stadium, the Stadium Trust, can we put a time frame for a report coming back on that? So that it's really clear that we're actually actively pursuing the opportunities. What concerns me is we've got really time-critical dates that unless we make a decision, we actually lose the opportunity to defer the new stadium because the temporary one will be past its useful life.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. So I think that we probably need a report back on the request a report on the temporary stadium. Oh no, what's it called? The Stadium Trust submission by the end of August.
I would prefer August, knowing what else is happening in terms of financial strategy, everything landing on 31 July. I think that allows it time for proper consideration.
But it does mean that if you've got it earlier than that, you can bring it forward as long as it's with us by
no later than the end of August.
Yeah, to the full council by the end of July, but by the end of August.
We also want to understand actually the Stadium Trust financial position as well. I mean, obviously they owe us a considerable amount of money and have done so for quite a considerable amount of time. So as part of this report, we need to have some engagement with the Stadium Trust on their financial situation.
I'll ensure the report covers all financial aspects.
All aspects of it. All right.
The longer we leave it, the more cost it's being incurred because the seats are currently leased. So
Yeah,
that's why it's really time
we
critical.
understand that issue, but we need to look at the options for that. All right, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. So now we move on to the new schedule. And, or do we need to stop for a morning tea? Is there morning tea?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
There's morning tea outside, so I'll adjourn now before we go on to the next set of changes. I'll give time to get them up on the screen, and so if we can be back here in 10 minutes. Thank you.